ready for a blast from the past. We're taking a deep dive into Batman Beyond. Futuristic Batsuit, new Batman in Neo Gotham, Bruce Wayne handing off the reins. You sent in some articles about the show, and honestly, even I was surprised by how it all began.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it. This show, which became something so unique, started because some network executive basically said, I want a teenage Batman.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, right?
Right.
Like, at best, you'd get a cheesy, forgettable attempt at a spinoff. What were they thinking?
Right. Like, come on, it just screams cash grab, trying to capitalize on Batman's popularity with a younger audience. But here's the thing, and this is what I find fascinating. The creators, they took this really limited directive and they turned it into something really special, something darker, and honestly way more interesting.
Yeah. It wasn't your typical Saturday morning cartoon. The articles mentioned a cyberpunk aesthetic, darker storylines. Heck, even the music was totally different. What do you think was behind that shift?
It wasn't just about being edgy for the sake of it, the darkness. It was essential for showing how Batman's legacy would play out in a world, dealing with all this advanced tech, but still struggling with the same old social problems. It brought a grittiness, a complexity that really reflected those late 90s anxieties about the future.
Like a visual interpretation of, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Exactly. And a great example of this is that episode where you've got this new generation dealing with a deadly steroid epidemic, right? Well, the source. It directly traces back to Bane's venom from Bruce Wayne's time as Batman. The show constantly reminds you that the past, it has a way of catching up, even in Neo Gotham.
That's pretty heavy. But okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Replacing Bruce Wayne, that's a bold move. Did the new Batman, Terry McGinnis, actually live up to the legacy?
And that's where Batman Beyond really shines. Terry's got to handle the weight of being Batman, sure, but he's also dealing with stuff Bruce never did. School, family drama, relationships. It's a more grounded take on being a hero, something younger viewers could connect with.
And it's not like Bruce was sending him off to fight bank robbers with a pat on the back and a pep talk.
Yeah.
This guy had to deal with some seriously creepy villains. I still get chills thinking about that shape-shifting Inque.
Inque's a perfect example of how Batman Beyond modernized those classic villain tropes, visually striking, powers, and a backstory that play on those fears of body horror and, corporate control.
Speaking of classic villains, the articles mentioned some familiar faces from Bruce's past showing up, like Mr. Freeze and even the Joker. How did they bring those iconic villains into this new world without it just feeling like a rehash?
It wasn't just about cheap cameos. These returns, they served a purpose. They underlined the lasting impact of Batman's actions, forcing Terry to confront them head-on. Take the Return of the Joker movie, for example. It wasn't just another showdown. It was about Terry proving he deserved to be Batman by facing down not just a ghost from the past, but the most terrifying ghost imaginable.
Right. That movie's like a Batman Beyond rite of passage. Watching it as a kid, I thought it was just a cool Joker story. But it's so much more than that.
Exactly. It's like this culmination of Terry's journey and the show's themes. He's wrestling with Bruce's legacy, always feeling like he's in this legend's shadow, the Joker's return. It makes him face the darkest parts of that legacy.
Because the Joker represents everything terrifying, everything chaotic about Batman's past.
Exactly. And not just Batman's personal demons, but the trauma inflicted on the whole Bat family. Trauma that still haunts Bruce, even in his old age. Terry's forced to confront that trauma, that legacy of pain, in such a visceral way.
So it's not just a physical fight. It's a psychological battle for Terry, proving he can handle the darkness that comes with being Batman.
Absolutely. The Joker taunts him relentlessly in that movie, calls him a punk, an amateur, a costumed errand boy following orders from a senile old man. Talk about psychological warfare.
Wow, that adds a whole new layer to it. No wonder it's considered a classic.
Right, and it circles back to what we were saying before. Terry represents this new generation stepping into an icon's role. Return of the Joker. It's the ultimate test. Can Terry really be Batman? Or is he just wearing the suit?
He has to overcome the ghosts of the past while making his own path. Finding his own way to fight for justice in a world completely different from Bruce's. It's like that saying, the student becomes the master. Not necessarily by being better, but by adapting.
Perfectly said. And it's that evolution, that willingness to change while keeping those core principles, that makes Batman Beyond, and especially Return of the Joker, so compelling.
It's a story about legacy, about the weight and the honor of carrying a torch even as the world changes.
Yeah.
Who knew a kid's cartoon about a teenage Batman could be so deep?
It just shows you the power of taking what seems like a limiting idea and using it to explore something complex. And speaking of complex, we haven't even touched on how Batman Beyond took these villains and gave them a depth, a nuance that's really surprising. Take Mr. Freeze, for example. Mr. Freeze, yeah, he's a great example. He was always this tragic figure, even back in Bruce's time. But Batman Beyond, it doesn't just retell his old story, it takes that tragedy to a whole new level.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. I need to hear more.
You remember how Mr. Freeze, his whole thing was finding a cure for Nora, right? His wife. Cryogenically frozen, his one true love trapped in that frozen sleep.
Yeah, his whole life revolved around saving her.
Well, in Batman Beyond, we find out that Nora, she was revived.
Wow, after all that time. So did they finally get their happy ending?
Sadly, no. And that's what makes it even more tragic. You see, Nora, she'd moved on.
Oh, man. That's harsh.
It makes you think about love and loss, doesn't it? How time changes things. And for Mr. Freeze, that realization, it's devastating. He devoted his entire life to this love that, in the end, he couldn't get back.
So what happens to him in Neo Gotham? Does he just completely snap?
It's interesting. At first, he tries to rebuild his life. He even tries to use his cryogenic tech, for good this time.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising. After all that heartache, you'd expect him to just go back to being a villain.
It shows that even with villains, things aren't always so simple. They have layers. Even after all the pain he's gone through, there's still a part of him that wants to redeem himself, to atone for what he's done.
There's something hopeful about that. That even someone as broken as Mr. Freeze can still try to be better.
Right. But of course, this being Batman Beyond, things never stay simple for long, especially when it comes to redemption. And that willingness to tackle tough questions, those moral gray areas, that's what makes Batman Beyond more than just your average superhero story. It's not afraid to get dark, to explore the complexities of good and evil.
I'm starting to see why you're so drawn to this show. It's more than just the action. It's about the characters, their struggles, even the villains. They're not just evil because they're villains. They have reasons, motivations, sometimes even tragic pasts.
And we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There are so many other great villains we could talk about. Inque, Blight, Spellbinder, each one reflecting these anxieties, these challenges of Neo Gotham. They're not just obstacles for Terry, they embody these deeper societal fears.
Okay, now you're just making me want to binge watch the entire series.
Uh-huh.
But before we go down that rabbit hole, I have to ask, what about the new villains introduced in Batman Beyond? What makes them stand out?
The new villains, they're just as compelling. They really capture the anxieties of this future dominated by technology, by mega corporations, like Blight, for example.
All those do.
He's like this embodiment of corporate greed run amok, the dangers of technology without any thought for the consequences, driven by ambition, warped by the very technology he's trying to control. A real cautionary tale.
That's super relevant today, even more so than when the show first aired. Well, with the rise of big tech and everything.
It's like they knew what they were talking about,
So it's more than just cool gadgets and futuristic skylines. It's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties about the future.
Exactly. And it does it while still delivering those classic Batman thrills. But there's one crucial element we haven't talked about, something that really makes this show special: the music. Batman Beyond went for something different. Grittier, more industrial. It reflects the urban decay, the tech anxieties of Neo Gotham.
Yeah. It's got that dark electronic sound, almost like a blend of industrial and cyberpunk, like something you'd hear in Blade Runner.
Exactly. The composers, Christopher Carter, Lolita Ritmanis, Michael McChristian, they drew inspiration from all these genres: industrial, techno, even a bit of heavy metal. They created a soundscape that's as much a character as Terry or Bruce. It builds the suspense, even adds this emotional weight to some scenes.
It's true. I remember watching certain episodes as a kid, and the music would give me chills. You just knew anything could happen in this future Gotham.
It creates this underlying tension, like the city's ready to explode, and then there's that theme song.
Oh man, that theme song is so catchy. It's simple, but so impactful.
Right. Minimalist electronic music at its best. That driving beat, that distorted guitar, and those three notes, the ones that play over the title card, instantly recognizable. They set the tone for the whole series.
It's like they're saying, this isn't your parents' Batman.
Exactly. The theme, much like the show itself, it blends the familiar with the new. It takes the core of Batman, the mystery, the danger, and translates it into this futuristic, kind of unsettling sound.
And you can't forget that opening credit sequence, the visuals, the music. It all just fits perfectly.
Absolutely. It pulls you right into the world of Batman Beyond. It's amazing how much detail went into every part of the show. The animation, the sound design, the writing, everything.
It really shows you how much the creators cared. They weren't just putting out another cartoon. They were adding to the Batman legacy. And for a show set in the future, it's incredible how relevant it still feels. The themes of technology, corporate greed, inequality, it's like they were looking into a crystal ball.
It's true. Those anxieties, they haven't gone away. If anything, they're even more relevant now. Makes you wonder what the creators would do if they were making this show today.
What new villains would Terry face? What would Neo Gotham look like now?
That's a question for another deep dive. But for now, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
We've just scratched the surface, but it's been fun. To everyone listening, if you haven't seen Batman Beyond in a while, or if you've never seen Terry's First Flight, go check it out. It's a show that's aged really well, a fresh perspective on Batman that's still relevant today.
And who knows, you might find yourself asking some tough questions about the world we live in, the legacies we inherit, and the future we're all creating.
And that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But remember, like Batman, never stop exploring, never stop questioning, and never be afraid to push the boundaries. Until next time.